My name's Shawn from Los Angeles, California. I grew up in the church, and so I was always over here in the church side, and there's the secular side, and that's our view that was kind of imparted to us, is that there's two places. You know, they're not one, they're not a combined place. And so, I felt that way probably until I was around 27, 28, and then in 2001, dramatically, I had an encounter. There was it was a season of my life where I was transitioning the way that I thought, and I didn't know how much God was transitioning that, and I knew He was giving me language that would help people also to transition who've been in the church for a long time. And I started to see how God looks down on the earth, and He doesn't see secular Christian, He sees kingdom. He sees both things and how His kingdom can go in both arenas equally as strong and powerful without measure. And so in the encounter that I had a man come in the room at 6 in the morning while I was asleep, thought it was a real man, woke up, startled at the foot of my bed. I look at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a man in here. What is this? And your mind's racing going, what's going on? And I wanted to say something like, who are you? But then I'm thinking, this could be one of those encounters. This could be an encounter of a God kind. Is this a real man who broke into the house? He looks like he's here for a purpose. He didn't feel unsafe. And all of a sudden I hear a voice right here from this side of my head. And it said, welcome the minister of finance of the kingdom. And honestly, I didn't even equate it until afterwards. I was doing research on what that term minister of finance was. I didn't even know each government had one. I didn't even know that much about it. So I'm thinking, why is he here visiting me? That's the first thought that I had. And I knew it was an angel. And so this angel was standing there, and I was thinking, a million miles an hour, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? And then I just thought, this is God's gig. I'm just going to rest in this and just see what happens. I don't know what God wants to do with this. And he walked over to the side of my bed. He didn't communicate for a long time, but he did things and showed me things. Like he would point and a vision would appear or something would happen and I would see different things. He took me into an experience. I was standing on one of the mountains in Israel, and I'm looking down, and it was when Solomon was building his temple. And it was, you have to realize I'm back in history looking at this ancient temple. It was technology that's so archaic and ancient. And Solomon was finally building the temple that David was promised that he would be able to be built. And I'm looking at it, and the object wasn't the house of God. And what I was seeing, the object was all the greatest resources known to the Western world in one generation were brought together. In one generation, they were brought together to be a picture of God dwelling with His people. Everything was the absolute best that was known to man, because at that point, Solomon had lived with such great favor of God that he'd been accumulating great wealth. And so there had never been wealth like what Solomon had in all of history. And he used it to build God His place, His resting place. And I'm watching this and I hear the voice of the angel say, again, there's going to be a day that was a picture of the generation that's alive, who's going to bring all the greatest resources known to man to build God His house, where God wants a presence in every place in the world. He wants a presence in the movie industry. He wants a presence in government. He wants a presence in education. He wants a presence in agriculture. He wants a presence in, all these different areas. There's a difference in what we think of as Christianity and Christian efforts and what heaven is endorsing right now. And you can see many of the things that have the most favor on them, and the projects that have had the most favor on them are people who are cooperating with God and using that value system to just do, to just make, to just be. Jesus was promised that He'd have the whole world as His inheritance, and the people in the world are the whole world. It's not the world itself, but the people in the world would be His inheritance, and that there'd be a generation that would walk in the fullness of being a mature bride, being a mature body of believers for that purpose, to walk in full cooperation with them. And so a lot of what we've seen in the church is that people are going into a place where there's a lot of ministry of restoration, inner healing, counseling, life skills, life coaching, live your best life now, all those things, which are good themes. None of those are bad themes. But what happens when you get restored? What happens when you know how to walk in purpose? What would happen if you all of a sudden had all the finances, you were at the best place you were at in your personality, your skill level, your talent, everything, and you could just do what you were called to do? That's what eternity is like. That's what Adam and Eve had. They weren't restoring anything. There was nothing else that needed to be created. It was free access. I was focused on ministry, which much of the church ministry I was involved with was restoring or prophesying destiny or awakening people to their passion for Jesus. But what happens when you have all those things? What happens when you're a person who sees God, the Father, has a desire for His Son, Jesus, that you can cooperate with heaven's agenda and that there's a whole realm of heaven that will back you up. Christians know the times and the seasons. That's what we're called to know, the times and the seasons we're living in. We're called to be the stewards of the earth. And so commodities and stocks are important to that process. We're called to cooperate no matter what with what God's doing on the earth and all of the resources, all of the commodities, all of the business, and so some people are being called right now to work as stockbrokers. Some people are called right now to buy into stocks and to invest. And there's, because of the scriptures in the Bible about the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous, everybody's been talking about what does that look like? What does it look like when the wealth of the wicked gets turned over to the righteous? When I had some of these experiences, some of these encounters, it was so simple to me in the sense it's going to happen many different ways. And so I don't want to limit it because God's big. It's not about the judgment of God coming to reveal the unrighteousness so that the righteous could rise up and fill in the gap and fill in the space. The transfer of wealth is when people are hearing God, knowing where to invest and knowing what to create. And as they create it, it creates a market. It's not about just redoing markets that are already created. The main heart of God is that there's themes and subjects that need to be stewarded on the earth right now, and He wants to position Christians to do that. And the transfer of wealth is when Christians are hearing God at the right times and the right seasons to get in and out of markets, to start things up, to create markets. And we're called to create, markets. The same creative God that said, "Let there be light," is saying right now, create here. So what happens when it's God who's saying, you go and create, you say, "Let there be light" in this marketplace? And so the transfer of wealth that's about to come, we don't even need the money that's in the world. We have God. He'll so create and dwarf and trump and establish economy that's much different. What happens when there's a people of understanding and wisdom that God can apply Himself to? That's when the transfer of wealth will happen. If you're positioned rightly in an industry and you start to pursue it and you start paying a price of really listening to God's heart there and really building a track record, not just being flaky and saying, "I think I heard God, here's, I'm going to call my stockbroker," but you're hearing God, you're getting a track record, you're tracking with people who are hearing from God, you're building community in this thing. There's a whole kingdom group that's going forward in the marketplace right now, and I believe that there's ways to connect, link to it, build a track record, add your piece to it. But right now is a time where it's not good to be a lone ranger, it's not good to be a lone dog, but there's a place of connecting to other people and hearing the Lord together, because the transfer of wealth is now. It's started already. It's not 10 years from now, it's started now, and we're seeing people benefiting from it right now.